Karen stood at the locked gate, staring at the chain and padlock, her voice sharp and furious. "Open that gate right now. I have rights. You can't block access to a natural lake." Like shouting about rights could erase what the deed had been. Saying since I inherited the property, like 250 people, a DJ, and food trucks could override written. Notice sent 3 times. What she didn't know was that the sheriff was already on his way. This wasn't blocking families from a lake or being difficult. 280 acres. A private lake on private land. An HOA social chair who'd sold 250 tickets to an event on property she'd never owned, never had permission to use, and been explicitly told in writing could not happen. Karen made the mistake every HOA organizer makes, assuming that community momentum, emotional appeals, and sheer numbers would force the gate open. It didn't. Over 2 hours. I watched Karen Whitfield discover what happens when you advertise an event as our lake, ignore multiple written warnings, show up with a caravan expecting the owner to back down. This is the story of how an HOA social chair lost her position, her reputation, and 250 ticket sales because she couldn't answer one question the sheriff asked. "Yes. Do you have anything in writing?" Not because I wanted to ruin her event, because property law doesn't care how many people you invited or how loud you shout. It cares who owns the land. But let me start from the beginning. Before we dive into, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more interesting stories just like this. Bennett. Lake had been mine for almost 2 years now. And in that time, I'd learned something important. People will respect your boundaries only if you make them crystal clear. After the hydroelectric mess with Ridgewood Estates, the illegal turbine, the lawsuit, the $345,000 settlement, established simple rules for the property. They were posted at every access point, recorded with the county, and non-negotiable. Bennett Lake private property access by written permission online. I would access if you were NES. The rules were straightforward. Written permission required. No verbal agreements, no assumptions, no I thought it was okay. If you want to use the lake, you ask in writing, and I respond in writing. Limited recreational licenses only. I'd granted access to a handful of respectful neighbors' families who fished from the shore. A retired teacher who kayaked twice a week. Small scale, low impact, documented, revocable. No large events, no parties, no gatherings, no commercial. Use the lake wasn't a venue, it was private property, and I intended to keep it that way. No HOA functions ever after what Ridgewood had done. I wasn't interested in letting any HOA assume they had rights to my land. For nearly 2 years, it had worked. Neighbors who respected the rules had access. The ones who didn't. But that was about to change. Summit Cove was a newer subdivision, about a mile east of Bennett Lake, 250 homes, upscale but not quite luxury. Marketed to young families and professionals looking for mountain living with community amenities. They had a clubhouse, a pool, tennis courts, and an HOA that seemed obsessed with proving they were the premier community. In the county, I'd never had any interaction with them. Their property didn't touch mine, and as far as I knew, none of their residents had ever asked for access to the lake until Karen Whitfield became their social chair. I first heard her name from Ed, the retired neighbor who'd been one of my earliest respectful access licensees. He stopped by the cabin one Saturday afternoon in early June, looking uncomfortable. "I need to tell you something," Ed said. "There's talk in Summit Cove about using your lake for an event." "What kind of event?" "Big one, HOA, summer bash." "Saw a flyer at the hardware store, food trucks, DJ, inflatable water slides. They're calling it the Summit Summer Bash at the lake." I felt my stomach tighten. "Did they ask me for permission?" "I don't think so. The flyer says it's at the Summit Cove private lake, but there's no lake in Summit Cove, I'm pretty sure." "They mean yours." Ed handed me a photo he'd taken of the flyer on his phone. Summit Summer BAS, June 24th, 12 to 6 p.m. lakefront party at the Summit. Cove private lake food trucks, DJ games, swimming inflatable Supan to all Summit Cove residents, and GUESTSRSVP on Eventbrite $15. Persani stared at the flyer. Summit Cove, private lake. There was no such thing. The only lake anywhere near Summit Cove was mine. Who's organizing this? I asked. A woman named Karen Whitfield. She's the new social chair. Real, ... energetic type. I thanked Ed and went inside. To do some research, Karen Whitfield's social media presence was exactly what I expected. Loud, polished, and relentlessly focused on community. Her Facebook page was filled with photos of HOA events, motivational quotes about bringing people together, and dozens of posts promoting the upcoming Summer Bash. One post in particular caught my eye. Can't wait for the Summit Summer Bash at our beautiful private lake. This is what community is all about, coming together, celebrating and enjoying the natural beauty we're so lucky to have access to. See you Lakeside, Summit Cove family? The comments were full of excitement. Parents asking about parking, people asking if they could bring extra guests, someone asking if kayaks were allowed, and in every response, Karen referred to it as our lake, not a lake. Not the nearby lake. Our lake, as if Summit Cove owned it. I clicked through to the Eventbrite page. Over 250 people had RSVP'd the event. Description included a map with a pin, dropped directly on Bennett Lake. They were planning to bring 250 people to my property, without asking, without permission, without even acknowledging that the land belonged to someone else. I called Patricia the next morning. They're doing it again, I said. A different HOA. Summit Cove. They're planning a 250-person party. At my lake, food trucks, DJ, inflatables, they're charging admission and calling it the Summit Cove Private Lake. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Did they ask for permission? No. Do they have any recorded rights, easement, license, anything? They don't even border my property. They're a mile away, so they're just ... assuming they can use it. Apparently, Patricia sighed. Okay, first step, written notice. Clear, unambiguous, documented. Tell them in writing that they do not have permission. The event cannot happen. On your property, and any attempt to access the lake will be treated as trespassing, and if they ignore it, escalate. But let's start with the notice and see how they respond. I drafted the notice that afternoon and sent it via email and certified mail to the Summit Cove HOA board, with Karen Whitfield specifically copied. Unauthorized use of private property. Bennett, Lake Deer Summit Cove, HOA, Board and Ms. Whitfield, it has come to my attention that your organization is advertising and selling tickets to an event scheduled for June 24th at the Summit Cove Private Lake. I am writing to inform you that there is no such property. The lake being referenced in your promotional materials is Bennett Lake, a privately owned body of water located entirely on my deeded property. Summit Cove HOA has no easement license or recorded right to access, use, or host events on my land. I do not grant permission for the June 24th event. Any individuals who enter my property on that date will be considered trespassers, and I will take all necessary legal action to protect my rights, including involving law enforcement. I expect you to cancel the event, refund participants, and correct all public communications that misrepresent ownership or access rights to my property. Sincerely. Alex Benatai. Hit send and waited. The response came 2 days later, not from the HOA board, but from Karen directly. It was sent via Facebook Messenger at 11:47 p.m., and it was something. Hi, Alex. Got your email, and I think there's been a misunderstanding. The lake has always been a community resource. Your aunt used to let people use it all the time. I checked with some of the older residents, and they said she was super chill about it. It's been a gathering spot for years. We're not trying to cause problems. We just want to bring the community together and enjoy the natural beauty we all share. I'm sure we can work something out. Let me know when you're free to chat. I stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to Patricia over the phone. She thinks this is a misunderstanding, I said. It's not, Patricia replied. Trespassing, respond in writing. Be polite, but firm. Reiterate, no permission, no event, no exceptions. I wrote back, Karen, there is no misunderstanding. Bennett Lake is private property, deeded solely in my name. There are no community rights, no historical easements, and no shared access. My aunt may have allowed occasional individual use on a case-by-case basis, but that does not create a Legal right for an HOA to host a 250-person commercial event. The event cannot happen on my property. I will not work something out. I expect you to cancel it immediately. Alex, her response came within minutes. Wow, okay. I didn't realize you were going to be like this. We're just trying to do something nice for families, and you're acting like we're criminals. You can't just hoard a lake and keep it from everyone. It's not how community works. I didn't respond. The flyers stayed up. The Eventbrite page stayed live. The Facebook posts kept coming. Karen doubled down, posting a long message to the Summit Cove Facebook group on June 20th, 4 days before the event. Quick update on the summer bash. There's been some confusion about access to the lake, but I want everyone to know the event is still on. We've been using that lake for years, and one person doesn't get to just lock it down because they feel like it. This is about community. This is about families, and we're not letting one gatekeeper ruin it for everyone. See you Saturday. The post had over 100 comments, most supportive, a few skeptical. One person asked, "Are you sure we're allowed to be there?" Karen's response, "Absolutely. It's a natural resource. He can't block access to water. Trust me, I've done my research." She hadn't, because if she had, she'd know that private lakes on private land are exactly that. Private, and the owner has every right to keep people out. I drove down to the access gate on the morning of June 23rd, the day before the event, to check the property. What I found made my blood run cold. There were people everywhere. A catering van was parked near the shoreline. Two men in Summit Cove HOA shirts, measuring distances and marking spots with stakes and tape. A woman with a clipboard was taking photos of the dam. A truck with a trailer full of folding chairs and tables sat near the gate. None of them had asked for permission. None of them had keys. They'd just driven through the unlocked gate and started setting up. I parked my truck and got out. One of the men with the stakes looked up. "Hey, you're here to help set up?" "No," I said. "I'm here to tell you to leave. This is private property." The man laughed. "Come on, man. Karen cleared this. We're just getting ready for tomorrow." Karen doesn't own this property. I do. And she doesn't have permission to host anything here. The woman with the clipboard walked over. "Are you Alex?" "Yes. Karen said you might show up." "Look, we're not trying to cause trouble. This event is for families. Kids, it's a community thing. Can't we just know?" I said. "You need to leave now." The woman's smile faded. "We've already sold 250 tickets. We've got vendors, equipment, a DJ. You can't just shut this down the day before. I can. And I am. This land is mine. You don't have permission. Leave or I'm calling the sheriff." The crew exchanged glances. Then, reluctantly, they started packing up. I stood by the gate and watched them go. Every truck, every person, until the property was empty again. Then I locked the gate, because tomorrow, Karen Whitfield was going to show up with 250 people, DJ and a party bus, and she was going to find out what happens when you try to throw a party on land. You don't own, the gate stays locked, and the owner doesn't care how many people you invited. I returned to the property later that afternoon and found Karen Whitfield standing near the shoreline, clipboard in hand, sparking instructions at a group of volunteers who were unloading folding tables from a pickup truck. She was exactly as I'd imagined from her social media presence. Mid-40s blonde highlights, Summit Cove, HOA polo shirt, and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. I parked near the gate and walked down to where she was standing. "Excuse me," I said. Karen turned, smiled brightly, and extended her hand. "Hi, you must be Alex. I'm Karen Whitfield, social chair for Summit Cove. Thanks for letting us use the space. This is going to be amazing." I didn't shake her hand. "This is my lake. You don't have permission to host anything here." Her smile faltered, but only for a second. "Oh, I got your email. Look, I totally understand you're concerned, but your aunt let people use this lake. All the time. I checked with the Facebook Moms group. Tons of people have been coming here for years. It's basically community property. It's not. Well, it's been treated like it is. And honestly, we're just trying to do something nice for families. This event is going to bring the community together. I don't see why that's a problem." I kept my voice calm and even. The lake, the road, and the shoreline are all on a single, private parcel, in my name. Summit Cove HOA has no rights, here no easement, no recorded agreement, no common area ownership. None. Karen waved her hand dismissively. Okay, but we're not trying to claim ownership. We just want to use it for one day. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. You're planning to bring 250 people onto my property without permission? That's trespassing. Stop gatekeeping nature, Karen said, her tone sharpening. Can't just hoard a lake. We all pay taxes too, you know. This is a natural resource. You don't get to lock it down just because you feel like it. I'm not locking down nature, I said. I'm protecting private property. And I'm telling you now, no event, no 250 guests, no vendors, no parking on the access road. If anyone is on my land on June 24th, it's trespassing. This is your notice. Karen stared at me, her smile gone, her jaw tight. Are you serious right now? Completely? Do you have any idea how much work has gone into this? How many people are counting on it? How many kids are excited? That's not my problem. You should have asked permission before you started planning. Karen's voice rose. I'm not canceling this event because you're having some kind of power trip. If you try to shut this down, I'll go to the county. I'll call code enforcement. I'll tell everyone you're harassing families and blocking access to public water. It's not public water, it's private. We'll see about that, Karen snapped. She turned to her volunteers. Keep unloading. We're not stopping. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the tables, the truck, and Karen standing in the middle. Of it all, I'm documenting this. If anything is still here tomorrow, I'm calling the sheriff. Karen laughed, short, bitter, mocking. Good luck with that. I left the property, drove straight to the county clerk's office, and requested certified copies of my deed and the parcel map showing the boundaries of Bennett Lake. I also stopped at the sheriff's office and filed a trespass advisory, formal notice that I was the property owner, that I'd warned specific individuals they did not have permission to enter, and that I was requesting law enforcement assistance if they showed up anyway. The deputy who took the report was polite and professional. So this HOA is planning a party on your land without permission? Correct. I've told them in writing and in person. They're proceeding anyway, and the property is clearly posted. Yes, signs at every access point. The deputy made notes. They show up, call us, we'll respond. And with the trespass advisory on file, we can act immediately. I thanked him and left. That evening, I sent a final written notice to Karen and the Summit Cove HOA board, this time via email with delivery confirmation and a CC to my attorney, Patricia. Final notice, no permission GR into Miss Whitfield and Summit Cove HOA board. This is my final written notice regarding the event scheduled for June 24th at Bennett Lake. You do not have permission to access, use, or host any event on my property. The lake, access road, and surrounding land are privately owned, clearly posted, and not open to the public or to Summit Cove HOA. If anyone enters my property on June 24th, I will consider it knowing trespass. I have filed a trespass advisory with the sheriff's office, and I will request immediate law enforcement response. The access gate will be locked. Any attempt to damage, bypass, or remove the lock will be considered criminal property damage. Cancel the event. Refund your participants. Do not proceed. Alex Benetai hit send and waited. The response came an hour later, not from Karen directly, but from an HOA-wide email blast sent to every resident in Summit Cove. I got a copy from Ed, who'd been forwarded the message by a friend who lived in the subdivision. The subject line read, "Important update, Summer Bash still owing." The body of the email was pure Karen. "Hi, Summit Cove family. I want to address some rumors that have been circulating about the Summer Bash. Yes, the event is still happening. Yes, it's still at the lake. And no one person does not get to shut it down just because he's decided to be difficult. Some of you may have heard that the property owner is claiming the lake is private. Let me be clear. Can't legally block access to water. Water is a natural resource, and in North Carolina, you cannot prevent people from accessing navigable waterways. I've done my research, and we are well within our rights to use the lake for a community gathering. The so-called owner has been harassing our volunteers. threatening us with law enforcement and generally acting like what I can only describe. As the lake troll, this is not about property rights. It's about one person trying to control something that belongs to everyone. We've worked too hard on this event to let him ruin it. The summer bash is happening. Bring your families. Bring your friends. We'll see you lakeside on Saturday. Community over gatekeepers. Karen Whitfield, Social Chair. Summit Cove, HOA. I read the email twice, then forwarded it to Patricia with a single line. She's telling 250 people to trespass on my property. What do we do? Patricia called me 5 minutes later. She just created a paper trail proving she knows she doesn't have permission and is proceeding anyway. That's textbook intentional trespass. If she shows up, you call the sheriff, you document everything, and you let law enforcement handle it. If they damage the gate, criminal property damage, arrest charges, civil suit. She's digging her own grave. Good, I said, because I'm locking that gate at dawn, and I'm not opening it for anyone. Patricia's voice was calm, almost amused. Then I suggest you bring a camera, because this is going to be one hell of a show. I drove back to the property at 5:30 the next morning, June 24th, the day of the event. To rise over the ridge, casting long shadows through the trees, the access gate was still unlocked. I walked the perimeter, checked the shoreline, and confirmed that no one had tried to stage equipment overnight. Then I returned to the gate, pulled out a heavy-duty chain and padlock I'd bought the day before, and secured it. The gate was steel, set into concrete posts, and the lock was rated for industrial use. It wasn't coming off without bolt cutters, and anyone who tried would be on camera. I mounted a trail camera on a tree facing the gate, synced it to my phone, and set up my truck just inside the property line with the dash cam running. Then I sat down, poured a cup of coffee from my thermos, and waited. The first car arrived at 11:40-5, then another, then a whole convoy, and 20 minutes later, Karen Whitfield rolled up in a white SUV with a Summit Cove HOA decal on the door, a microphone clipped to her shirt, and a look on her face that told me she was about to have the worst day of her life because the gate was locked, and I was standing right behind it. The week leading up to June 24th, prepared like I was going to war because, in a way, I was Patricia, had been clear. If they show up after written notice, it's intentional trespass. But you need to document everything, stay calm, and let law enforcement handle the physical confrontation. Do not touch anyone. Do not block cars with your body. Do not give them anything they can twist into assault or harassment. I took her advice seriously Monday. June 19th, upgrade the gate tie, drove to a farm supply store to counties over, and bought the kind of hardware you'd use to secure a construction site. A heavy-duty chain, a hardened steel padlock with a shrouded shackle, and a secondary locking bar that would prevent anyone from simply lifting the gate off its hinges. The gate itself was already solid steel frame, set into concrete posts, but I reinforced the latch points and added a welded crossbar for extra support. When I was done, the gate wasn't coming open without bolt cutters, a grinder, or a truck with a tow chain. And anyone who tried would be committing criminal property damage on camera. Tuesday, June 20th, refreshed the signage. I printed a dozen new signs on weather-resistant material and posted them at every access point. The main gate, the service, road turnoff, and along the shoreline where people might try to walk in from adjacent properties, the signs were large. It's clear and unambiguous. Bennett Lake Private Propertino Trespassino Public Accessifilators will be prosecuted. CGS 14 to 159.12. The statute reference was intentional. North Carolina General Statute 14 to 159.12 makes it a Class 2 misdemeanor to enter posted private property after being notified by the owner. Wanted anyone who walked past those signs to know exactly what law they were breaking. Wednesday, June 21st, Sheriff's Office coordination. I returned to the Sheriff's Office and met with Sergeant Mike Hollins, the supervisor who'd handled the trespass advisory filing. I brought copies of everything: the deed, the parcel map, the email chain with Karen, the HOA-wide blast email where she told people to ignore my warnings, and photos of the posted signs. Sergeant Hollins reviewed the documents carefully. So this HOA is actively promoting an event on your land, even after you've told them in writing they don't have permission? Correct. And the event is this Saturday. Yes. They've sold over 250 tickets. They're bringing food trucks, a DJ, and inflatable water equipment. Hollins made notes. We'll have units on standby Saturday. If they show up and refuse to leave, call dispatch and reference this case number. We'll respond immediately. What if they damage the gate? That's criminal. Property damage. If we catch them in the act, they'll be arrested on site. And if they just walk around the gate and enter on foot, still trespass, with the advisory on file and the written notice you've sent, we can act without hesitation. Hollins looked up. You've done everything right, Mr. Bennett, if they proceed. The law is on your side. I thanked him and left, feeling more confident but still tense. Karen had made it clear she wasn't backing down, and I had no intention of letting her win. Thursday, June 22nd, attorney briefing Patricia and I spoke on the phone that evening. She walked me through exactly how to handle the confrontation if when Corinne showed up. Do not engage physically, Patricia said. No blocking cars with your body, no grabbing anyone, no touching their equipment. Let them yell, let them threaten, let them make a scene. You stay calm, you stay behind the gate, and you document everything. What if they try to force the gate open? You call 911 immediately and stay on the line. Let law enforcement handle it. If they succeed in breaking through, do not try to stop them. Just get clear, stay safe, and let the cops deal with it. What about recordings? Record everything. Video if possible, audio at minimum. North Carolina is a one-party consent state, so you're legally allowed to record any conversation you're part of. Get timestamps, get faces, get license plates. And if they claim they have a right to be there, they don't. You've sent written notice. You've posted signs. You've filed with the sheriff. Legally, they have zero ground to stand on. The question is whether they'll back down when confronted with that reality, or whether they'll double down and get themselves arrested. I had a feeling I knew which one Karen would choose. Friday, 23rd. The setup attempt. I drove to the property Friday afternoon to do a final check. As I approached the gate, I saw a pickup truck parked near the entrance and two men in Summit Cove HOA shirts, unloading folding chairs, and aluminum tent poles. I pulled up and got out. What are you doing? One of the men looked up, setting up for tomorrow. Did anyone tell you this is private property? We're just dropping off supplies. We'll haul them in tomorrow when the event starts. There's no event tomorrow. You need to take this stuff and leave. The man shrugged. Karen said it's fine. Karen doesn't own this land. I do. I'm telling you. Remove this equipment now, or I'm calling the sheriff. The two men exchanged glances, then started loading the chairs and poles back into the truck. They didn't argue. They didn't apologize. They just left. I took photos of their truck, their license plate, and the equipment they'd tried to stage. Then I checked the gate one more time, confirmed the lock was secure, and drove back to the cabin. Tomorrow was going to be a long day. Saturday, June 24th, Don and I woke up at 5 a.m., made a thermos of coffee, and drove to the gate just as the sun was breaking over the ridge. The property was silent. No cars, no people. No signs of another setup attempt. I parked my truck just inside the gate, angled so the dash cam had a clear view of the road. I pulled out the heavy-duty chain and padlock and secured the gate, looping the chain through the frame and around the support post twice, then snapping the lock closed with a solid final click. It wasn't coming open without tools. I mounted a trail camera on a tree facing the gate, synced it to my phone so I'd get real-time alerts, and checked the angle to make sure it captured the entire entrance and the road beyond. Then I set up a folding chair just inside the gate, poured myself a cup of coffee, and opened a book. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't avoiding confrontation. I was making a statement. This gate is locked. This land is mine. And I'm not going anywhere. If Karen wanted a show, she was going to get one, but it was going to be on my terms. 11:45 a.m. the caravan arrives. First car rolled up at 11:45, a minivan with a Summit Cove family bumper sticker. The driver slowed as they approached the gate, saw the chain and lock, and stopped about 20 feet back. A second car pulled up behind them. Then a third, then a catering van with Smoky Mountain BBQ painted on the side, then a flatbed truck, hauling a trailer stacked with inflatable water slides, then a white 15-passenger bus with Summit Cove community events printed across the side. Within 10 minutes, there were over 30 vehicles backed up along the gravel road, engines idling. People getting out to see what the holdup was, and then Karen Whitfield arrived. She pulled up in a white SUV with a Summit Cove HOA decal on the door, parked at the front of the line, and got out. She was dressed for the event: white capri pants, a turquoise Summit Cove polo, oversized sunglasses, and a wireless microphone clipped to her collar. She looked like she was about to host a morning talk show, not confront a locked gate on private property. She walked up to the gate, saw me sitting just inside, and stopped. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then Karen smiled tight, furious, barely holding it together, and said, "You've got to be kidding me." I set down my coffee, stood up, and replied calmly, "This is private property. You don't have permission to be here." And that's when she lost it. Karen stood at the gate, staring at the chain and lock, her chest rising and falling as she processed what she was seeing. Behind her, the line of vehicles stretched back down the gravel road: 30 cars, 2 catering vans, a DJ truck with speakers visible through the rear doors, and a flatbed hauling inflatable water slides. 250 people had shown up. Parents with kids, families with coolers, teenagers in swimsuits, all of them waiting, and the gate was locked.
Karen turned to face me, her voice rising sharp and furious. "Open that gate, right now!" I stayed where I was, standing just inside the fence line, hands at my sides, voice calm. "This is private property. You were told in writing. No event, no access, no exceptions." "I have rights," Karen screamed, stepping closer to the gate. "You can't block access to a natural lake. This is illegal." "It's not illegal. It's private property, and you don't have permission. We've been using this lake for years. This is historic community use. You can't just lock people out. There's no such thing as historic community use that overrides a deed," I said. "You don't have an easement. You don't have a license. You don't have anything in writing that gives you or your HOA any rights to this land." Karen jabbed a finger toward me, her voice loud enough that everyone in the line of cars could hear. "You're doing this to hurt families. You're punishing children because you have some kind of control issue." Behind her, I could see parents getting out of their cars, some holding the hands of confused kids in swim trunks and floaties. A few were filming on their phones. The crowd was growing, and Karen knew it. She turned to address them, raising her voice, playing to the audience. "Everyone, look at this! This man is locking children out of a lake, a natural body of water that we've all used for years. He's abusing his power, and he's traumatizing kids because he doesn't like the HOA." A few people murmured. One dad shouted, "Come on, man, just let the kids swim." I kept my voice level, calm, directed at Karen but loud enough for the crowd to hear. "This lake is on private property. The access road is private. The shoreline is private. The dam is private. Everything you see behind me is contained within a single parcel of land that I own. There is no public access. There is no right of way. There are no shared rights." Karen crossed her arms. "Water is a public resource. You can't just block people from accessing water." "This isn't a navigable waterway," I said. "It's a private lake, built on private land, fed by a creek that originates on private land. Under North Carolina law, I have every right to control access." "That's not true." "It is, and you know it is. Because I sent you the statute in my last email." Karen's face flushed. She turned back to the crowd. "He's lying. He's trying to scare us. We have every right to be here." One of the catering vendors got out of his truck and approached Karen. "Ma'am, if this is private property and we don't have permission, I can't unload. My insurance won't cover it." Karen spun toward him. "We do have permission. He's just being difficult." "Do you have it in writing?" the vendor asked. Karen hesitated. "We've always been allowed." "That's not in writing," the vendor said. "I need documentation or I'm leaving." Karen's voice rose to a shout. "You're under contract. You can't just leave." "Contract says I deliver to a legal event site," the vendor replied. "If this is trespassing, I'm not part of it." He walked back to his truck. Karen turned back to me, her jaw tight, her voice shaking with rage. "You're going to regret this. I'm not the one who planned an event on someone else's land," I said. Karen paced in front of the gate, clearly trying to think of a way forward. Then she turned to the crowd again and pointed at the gate. "The gate's on hinges. If we just lift it off, we can move it and get through." Two dads near the front of the line stepped forward. One of them, a guy in his 30s with a Summit Cove shirt, walked up to the gate and examined the hinges. "Yeah, I think we can do it, just need a couple people." I raised my voice, clear and direct. "The moment you touch that gate, you're committing criminal property damage. This property is posted, you've been given written notice. If you damage or bypass this gate, I will press charges." The dad looked at Karen. "Is he serious?" "He's bluffing," Karen snapped. "He can't arrest you. Just do it." "I won't arrest you," I said. "But the sheriff will. And they're already on their way." That was a bluff, barely. I hadn't called yet. But I had my phone in my hand, and I was ready. The dad hesitated, then stepped back. "I'm not risking the record for this." Another man, older, stepped forward. "Look, man, we've got kids here. Families. Can't you just let us through for a few hours? We'll clean up, we'll be respectful." "No," I said. "You were told in advance this event couldn't happen here. You chose to come anyway. That's not my problem." Karen's voice cut through again, louder, desperate. "Someone get bolt cutters. We're not letting him ruin this." A woman near the back of the crowd shouted, "Karen, maybe we should just go." "We're not going," Karen yelled back. "We paid for this. We planned this. He doesn't get to just shut us down." One of the vendors, a guy driving the flatbed with the inflatables, leaned out his window. "Ma'am, I can't drive around the gate, there's a ditch. I'll get stuck." "Then go through it," Karen shouted. "I'm not going through a ditch with a 2-ton trailer," the driver said flatly. "I'm leaving." He started backing up, forcing the cars behind him to reverse down the narrow gravel road. The catering van followed. Then the DJ truck. Karen watched them go, her hands clenched into fists, her face red. She turned back to me, stepping as close to the gate as she could, her voice dropping into something colder, more threatening. "You think you've won, but you just made an enemy of an entire community. I will make sure everyone knows what you did here. I will make sure you regret this." "I don't regret protecting my property," I said.
"Oh, you're going to?" Karen hissed.
"I'll go to the news. I'll file complaints with every agency I can find. You're going to wish you'd just opened this gate." I met her eyes, calm, unflinching. "You were told no. You ignored it. You brought 250 people to someone else's land without permission. And now you're threatening me because I enforced my rights? That's on you, Karen, not me." Karen opened her mouth to respond, but stopped, because at the far end of the road, blue lights had appeared. Two sheriff's department SUVs, rolling slowly up the gravel road, parting the line of cars as they approached. The crowd went quiet. Karen's face went pale. And I pulled out my phone, opened the video app, and started recording. Because this was about to get very, very interesting. The two sheriff's SUVs rolled to a stop about 20 feet from the gate. The doors opened, and two deputies stepped out. Sergeant Mike Hollins, who I'd spoken with earlier in the week, and a younger deputy whose nameplate read J. Torres. Hollins surveyed the scene. The locked gate, the line of cars stretching back down the road, the crowd of families and vendors, and Karen standing front and center, still holding her clipboard and microphone. He walked up to the gate and nodded at me. "Mr. Bennett, Sergeant, looks like your event showed up." "It's not my event," I said. "It's hers." I nodded toward Karen. Hollins turned to Karen. "Ma'am, are you the organizer of this gathering?" "Yes," Karen said, her voice sharp. "And he's illegally blocking access to a public lake. I want him cited." "Let's take this one step at a time," Hollins said calmly. "Deputy Torres, can you get statements from both parties?" "Mr. Bennett, if you'll come with me." "Ma'am, you stay here with Deputy Torres." Karen started to protest, but Torres raised a hand. "Just a few questions, ma'am. It'll only take a minute." I walked a short distance from the gate with Hollins, out of earshot of the crowd. He pulled out a notebook. "All right, walk me through it." I handed him a folder I prepared, a copy of the deed showing Bennett Lake and the surrounding 280 acres in my name, the parcel map with boundaries clearly marked, printed copies of the emails I'd sent to Karen and the HOA board, screenshots of Karen's Facebook posts, and the HOA-wide email calling me the lake troll, and photos of the setup attempt from the day before. Hollins flipped through the documents, taking his time. "So you own the lake, the access road, and all the surrounding land, correct? And you sent written notice to the HOA telling them they didn't have permission to hold this event?" "Multiple times. Email, certified mail, in-person verbal notice. I told Karen directly on Thursday that if anyone showed up, it would be trespassing. And she proceeded anyway. She sent an HOA-wide email telling people to ignore my warnings and show up. It's in the folder." Hollins found the email, read it, and shook his head. "That's bold. Any physical confrontation?" "She's yelled. She's threatened to sue me, go to the county, call code enforcement and ruin my reputation. But no physical contact." "Good, keep it that way." Hollins closed the folder. You've done everything right. Property's clearly posted. Notice was given, and you've got documentation. Legally, you're solid. Meanwhile, Deputy Torres was taking Karen's statement near the gate. I couldn't hear everything, but I could see her gesturing wildly, pointing at me, pointing at the lake, her voice rising and falling. After a few minutes, Hollins and I walked back to the gate. Torres stepped aside to brief his sergeant quietly. "Ma'am, I need to ask you one question. Do you have anything in writing that says you or your HOA have permission to use this property?" Karen blinked. "What? A lease? An easement? A license? Any kind of written agreement that gives you access to this lake?" "We don't need one," Karen said. "It's a community lake. We've always used it. His aunt let people come here all the time. It's been open for years. Do you have documentation?" Karen pulled out her phone and started scrolling frantically. "Look, here." She held up the screen, showing a photo of families at the lake, kids swimming, adults on the shore. "See, there are families at the lake. This has been going on for years." Hollins barely glanced at the phone. "Ma'am, pictures aren't right." Karen's face went red. "What?" "Pictures of people using the property don't create a legal right to use it. If the owner allowed occasional access in the past, that was permission given by the owner. It doesn't transfer to you, and it doesn't give your HOA the right to host a commercial event. This isn't commercial. It's a community gathering." "You charged admission," Hollins said. "I saw the Eventbrite listing. $15 per person. That makes it a commercial event." "That was just to cover costs." "Doesn't matter. You're hosting a paid event on private property without the owner's consent. That's trespassing." Karen's voice rose to a shout. "This is insane. He can't just lock people out of nature. Water is a public resource." "Not when it's on private land," Hollins said. "This lake is contained entirely within Mr. Bennett's property. It's not a navigable waterway. It's not public access. It's private, and the law is very clear on this. So you're taking his side?" Hollins's voice stayed calm, but there was an edge to it now. "Ma'am, the side we're on is the law, and the law says this land belongs to him." Torres stepped forward and addressed the crowd, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "All right, folks, listen up. This is private property. The gate is locked because the owner has the legal right to lock it. Any attempt to cross this gate, go around it, or damage it will result in arrest for trespassing and criminal property damage. If you're here for the event is not happening. You need to leave." A few people in the crowd started murmuring. One dad shouted, "We paid for tickets." "That's between you and the event organizer," Torres replied. "But you're not getting onto this property today." A woman near the back of the line got into her car and started backing down the road. Then another family followed. Then another. Some people lingered, taking photos of the locked gate and the deputies. A few walked up to me as they passed and quietly apologized. "We had no idea this wasn't HOA property," one man said. "We wouldn't have come if we'd known." "I appreciate that," I said. A mother with 2 kids stopped and looked at Karen, then at me. "Is it true you sent them a letter saying they couldn't do this?" "Yes, multiple times." She shook her head and walked back to her car, muttering, "Unbelievable." Karen stood near the gate, watching her event collapse in real time. The vendors were packing up. The families were leaving. Kids were crying. Parents were angry, not at me, but at her. She turned to Hollins, her voice desperate now. "You can't do this. This is illegal. I'm going to sue the county. I'm going to go to the news. I'm taking this to the state." "You're free to do that, ma'am," Hollins said. "But right now, you need to leave this property. You don't have permission to be here, and the owner has asked you to go." "I'm not leaving." "Ma'am, if you refuse to leave, I will arrest you for trespassing. Your choice." Karen stared at him, her chest heaving, her fists clenched. For a moment, I thought she was going to force the issue, get herself arrested just to make a point. But then her shoulders sagged. She turned, grabbed a clipboard, and stormed back to her SUV. Before she got in, she turned back to me, pointing over the gate, her voice cracking with rage. "You'll regret this. You just declared war on the HOA." I met her eyes, calm, steady. "Then bring paperwork, not a party bus." Karen slammed the car door and peeled out, kicking up dust as she sped back down a gravel road. Within 20 minutes, the road was clear. The vendors were gone. The families were gone. The catering vans, the DJ truck, the flatbed with the inflatables, all of it. Gone. The only people left were me, Sergeant Hollins, Deputy Torres, and the sound of the wind through the trees. Hollins walked over to the gate. "You handled that well, thanks. For what it's worth, she's going to try to make this a problem for you. File complaints, call the county, maybe even try to sue. People like her don't let go easily." "Let her try," I said. "I've got the deed. I've got the documentation. And I've got witnesses." Hollins nodded. "You do. And if she shows up here again without permission, call us. We'll handle it. Torres walked over and handed me a case number card. If she harasses you, if she tries to access the property again, reference this number. We've got everything documented. I thanked them both and they left. I stood by the gate for a long time after they were gone, looking out over the empty road, the dust still settling in the air. Karen had brought 250 people to my property. She'd sold tickets, she'd hired vendors, she'd spent weeks planning and promoting an event on land she didn't own. And when I told her no, she'd called me a troll, threatened me, and told an entire community to ignore the law. And it had all fallen apart in less than an hour, because the deputies had asked one question that Karen couldn't answer. Do you have anything in writing? And when the answer was no, everything else was irrelevant. The crowd dispersed. The vendors left. The event collapsed, not because I was cruel, not because I wanted to hurt families or ruin anyone's day, but because property law is simple. If you don't own it and you don't have permission, you don't have access. Karen had gambled that social pressure, emotional appeals, and sheer numbers would force me to open the gate. She lost. And now she was about to find out what happens when you declare war on someone who has the deed, the documentation, and the law on their side, because I wasn't going anywhere. And that gate, it was staying locked. The Summit Cove HOA Facebook group exploded within an hour of the failed event. I wasn't a member, but Ed, my neighbor who'd warned me about the event in the first place, sent me screenshots throughout the afternoon. The tone shifted fast. Confusion, then anger, then outright fury. Post number 1147 PM. Can someone explain what just happened? We drove an hour with 3 kids and got turned away at a locked gate. The sheriff said it was private property. I thought this was our lake. Replies piled up fast. Same here. We paid $60 for our family and didn't even get in. The vendors left. The DJ never set up. This is a disaster. Why didn't anyone verify we had permission to be there? Post number 2, 2:14 PM. I just read the emails. The property owner sent multiple notices to the HOA board saying we didn't have permission. Karen ignored all of them. She knew. That post included a screenshot of my final written notice, the one where I'd explicitly told Karen the gate would be locked and anyone who entered would be trespassing. The comments shifted. Wait, she knew and told us to go anyway? So we almost got arrested because Karen didn't want to admit she was wrong. I want my money back. This is fraud. Post number 3:02 PM. I'm a vendor. I was hired to cater this event. I drove 2 hours, paid for fuel and prep costs, and got turned away because the event was on privity and no one bothered to secure access. I'm billing the HOA for my losses. Another vendor chimed in. Same. We rented equipment specifically for this event. If the HOA can't pay, I'm filing in small claims. Post number 43:45 PM. From a homeowner who happened to be an attorney. Legal question. If someone had gotten hurt at this event, on property the HOA had no legal right to use, who would be liable? The HOA, the board members personally? This could have been a massive lawsuit waiting to happen. That comment got over 50 reactions and 24 replies, most of them variations on, oh my god, I didn't even think about that. By evening, the Facebook group had devolved into open warfare. Half the members were demanding refunds, a quarter were calling for Karen's resignation, and a vocal minority were defending her, claiming I was a bully and a gatekeeper who'd embarrassed the community for no reason. One of Karen's defenders posted, "Y'all are acting like Karen committed a crime. She was trying to do something nice for the community and got shut down by some guy who bought property and immediately started throwing his weight around. This is about control, not property rights." The response from another homeowner was swift and brutal. Karen advertised an event on land the HOA doesn't own. She ignored written warnings from the property owner. She told us it was our lake when it wasn't. She put the HOA at legal risk, wasted our money, and humiliated us in front of law enforcement. That's not doing something nice. That's incompetence. The emergency meeting the Summit Cove HOA board called an emergency meeting for Tuesday, June 27th, 3 days after the failed event. Ed told me it was standing room only, with over 120 homeowners packed into the clubhouse. Karen showed up, dressed professionally, carrying a binder, clearly ready to defend herself. The meeting started with the HOA president, a mild-mannered accountant named Greg Lawson, reading a statement. Another vendor chimed in. Same. We rented equipment specifically for this event. If the HOA can't pay, I'm filing in small claims. Post number 43:45 PM. From a homeowner who happened to be an attorney. Legal question. If someone had gotten hurt at this event, on property the HOA had no legal right to use, who would be liable? The HOA, the board members personally? This could have been a massive lawsuit waiting to happen. That comment got over 50 reactions and 24 replies, most of them variations on, "Oh my god, I didn't even think about that." By evening, the Facebook group had devolved into open warfare. Half the members were demanding refunds, a quarter were calling for Karen's resignation, and a vocal minority were defending her, claiming I was a bully and a gatekeeper who'd embarrassed the community for no reason. One of Karen's defenders posted, "Y'all are acting like Karen committed a crime. She was trying to do something nice for the community and got shut down by some guy who bought property and immediately started throwing his weight around. This is about control, not property rights." The response from another homeowner was swift and brutal. Karen advertised an event on land the HOA doesn't own. She ignored written warnings from the property owner. She told us it was our lake when it wasn't. She put the HOA at legal risk, wasted our money, and humiliated us in front of law enforcement. That's not doing something nice. That's incompetence. The emergency meeting the Summit Cove HOA board called an emergency meeting for Tuesday, June 27th, 3 days after the failed event. Ed told me it was standing room only, with over 120 homeowners packed into the clubhouse. Karen showed up, dressed professionally, carrying a binder, clearly ready to defend herself. The meeting started with the HOA president, a mild-mannered accountant named Greg Lawson, reading a statement. "This meeting has been called to address the events of June 24th and the concerns raised by members regarding the summer bash. We'll hear from the social chair, take questions, and discuss next steps." Karen stood and launched into her defense immediately. She was poised, rehearsed, and playing the victim. "I want to start by saying I'm deeply sorry that the summer bash didn't happen as planned. I worked incredibly hard on that event, and I know many of you were looking forward to it. What happened was not my fault. The property owner ambushed us. He waited until the last possible moment to lock the gate, knowing full well that we had 250 people on their way. This was a calculated effort to humiliate this community, and I refused to take the blame for his actions." A hand shot up in the crowd. A man in his 50s stood. "Karen, you're saying he ambushed you, but I've seen the emails. He told you weeks in advance that you didn't have permission. He told you in writing, multiple times." "How is that an ambush?" Karen's face tightened. "He sent vague threats, but he never followed through." "He locked the gate," the man interrupted. "He told you exactly what he was going to do, and he did it. You ignored him." Another homeowner stood. A woman holding a printed copy of my final notice. She read it aloud, slowly, clearly, so everyone in the room could hear. "You do not have permission to access, use, or host any event on my property. If anyone enters my property on June 24th, I will consider it knowing trespass. The access gate will be locked." She looked up. "That's not vague. That's crystal clear. You knew, Karen, and you told us to go anyway." Karen's voice rose. "I was trying to stand up for this community. I wasn't going to let one person bully us into cancelling. You advertised it as our lake." Another homeowner cut in, standing near the back. "You called it the Summit Cove private lake. You knew it wasn't. That's fraud." The room erupted in murmurs. Karen tried to regain control. "That was a marketing choice. It was a lie," the homeowner said flatly. "And it put all of us at risk. If someone had gotten hurt out there, we'd all be liable. The HOA, the board, maybe even us as members. You gambled with our money, our reputation, and our legal exposure, and you lost." Greg Lawson called for order and asked if anyone wanted to make a motion. A homeowner near the front stood. "I move that Karen Whitfield be removed as social chair, effective immediately." Another seconded. Karen shot to her feet. "You can't do this. I've done more for this community than anyone on this board. If you vote me out, I will sue this HOA for defamation and discrimination." Greg sighed. "Karen, that's your right. But the motion has been made and seconded. We're going to vote." "This is a witch hunt," Karen shouted. "You're scapegoating me because one guy with a deed decided to be difficult." "The vote is on the floor," Greg said calmly. "All in favor of removing Karen Whitfield as social chair." Hands went up across the room. Dozens of them. Opposed. A handful of hands. Maybe 10. "The motion passes," Greg said. "Karen, you're removed from your position as social chair. We're also placing a formal censure on the record for misrepresenting access rights to non-HOA property and for proceeding with an event after being explicitly denied permission by the property owner." Karen stood frozen, staring at the room, her face pale. Then she grabbed her binder, turned, and walked out without another word. The board voted on 2 additional motions that night: audit all past HOA events to determine if any were held on property the HOA didn't own or control. Consult legal counsel about the personal liability of board members who authorize events on non-HOA property without permission. Both motions passed unanimously. The apology 2 days later, I received an email from Greg Lawson, the HOA president. Subject: Apology from Summit Cove OA-AOA. Mr. Bennett, on behalf of the Summit Cove OA Board of Directors, I want to formally apologize for the events of June 24th. It has come to our attention that you provided clear, written notice to our former social chair that the planned event did not have your permission and could not proceed on your property. That notice was ignored, and our members were misled about the legal status of the event location. This was unacceptable. The board has removed the individual responsible and has implemented new policies to ensure that all future events are held only on HOA-owned or properly licensed property. We have no intention of pursuing any legal action against you, and we respect your property rights. If there is anything we can do to repair the relationship between our community and you as a neighbor, please let us know. Sincerely, Greg Lawson, President, Summit Cove OAI. I read the email twice, then forwarded it to Patricia. Her response was short. That's what accountability looks like. Well done. I didn't respond to Greg immediately. I wanted to see if the apology was genuine or just damage control. But a week later, when I saw that the Summit Cove Facebook group had posted a public notice, clarifying that Bennett Lake was private property, that the HOA had no access rights, and that members should not attempt to use it without written permission from the owner, I replied, Greg, thank you for the apology. I accept it. I'm not interested in conflict with your community. I'm interested in protecting my property and ensuring that boundaries are respected. If your members ever want to approach me individually about limited, low-impact recreational access, I'm willing to consider it on a case-by-case basis in writing with clear terms. But no HOA events, no large gatherings, and no assumptions. Alex Bennett Gregg replied within the hour. Understood. Thank you for your professionalism. I'll make sure the membership knows. And just like that, it was over. Karen was gone. The HOA had apologized. The community had learned a painful, expensive lesson about the difference between assumption and permission. And I still had my lake. Locked, protected, private, exactly as it should be. Over the next few weeks, life around Bennett Lake returned to normal. The gate stayed locked, unless I was there. The signs stayed posted, and the property remained quiet, private, and undisturbed. The Summit Cove OA followed through on their apology. Greg Lawson sent a follow-up email confirming that new policies had been implemented. All future events would be held only on HOA-owned property or venues with documented, written permission. No exceptions. The Facebook group remained civil. A few members posted questions about whether they could approach me individually for access, and Greg responded publicly each time with the same message. Bennett Lake is private property. The HOA has no access rights. If you want to ask the owner for permission, that's between you and him. But do so respectfully, in writing, and with no expectation of approval. It was exactly the right tone. And it worked. The pull-out requests about 3 weeks after the failed event, I received an email from a Summit Cove resident named Liam Chen. Mr. Bennett, my name is Liam Chen, and I live in Summit Cove. I wanted to reach out and apologize for the events of June 24th. I had no idea the lake was private property, and I'm embarrassed that I showed up without questioning it. I'm writing to ask if you'd consider allowing me occasional access for kayaking. I'm a photographer, and I've been looking for quiet places to practice nature photography. I'd be happy to follow any rules you set, specific days, limited hours, advance notice, whatever works for you. If you're not comfortable with it, I completely understand. Either way, thank you for your time. Sincerely, Liam Chen. The email was respectful, humble, and specific. No entitlement, no assumptions, just a polite request. I replied the same day. Liam, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the apology, and I'm willing to consider your request. Here's what I can offer. A revocable recreational access license for kayaking and photography. Limited to early mornings before 9 a.m. on weekends with advance notice via text. No guests, no motorized equipment, no fires or camping. The license is documented, recorded with the county, and revocable at my discretion if the terms are violated. If that works for you, let me know and I'll have my attorney draft the agreement. Alex Bennett Liam agreed. Patricia drafted a one-page license. We both signed it. I recorded it with the county clerk, and Liam showed up the following Saturday at 7 a.m. with his kayak and camera. He texted when he arrived. He stayed on the water. He left no trace. And when he was done, he sent me a photo he'd taken of the sunrise over the lake with a simple message, "Thank you for trusting me with this." It was exactly how access should work. 2 other Summit Cove families approached me over the following month, both polite, both specific, both willing to follow rules. I granted limited licenses to both. One for shoreline fishing with his young son, one for nature walks along the perimeter trail. Each license was documented, each one was revocable, and each one was built on respect, not entitlement. The families who didn't approach respectfully, who sent entitled messages or demanded access as if it were owed, got a polite but firm response. "Thank you for your interest, but I'm not granting access at this time." No explanation, no negotiation, just a boundary. And it held. The final reflection, I stood at the gate one evening in late July, watching the sunset over Bennett Lake. The water was calm, reflecting the amber and gold light, the surface broken only by the occasional rise of a fish or the ripple of a breeze. The gate was locked, the signs were posted, and the property was mine fully, legally, undeniably. Karen Whitfield had thought she could override that with community vibes, emotional appeals, and peer pressure. She'd thought that showing up with 250 people, a DJ, and a sense of moral righteousness would force me to open the gate. She was wrong. Because property law doesn't care how many people you bring. It doesn't care how loud you shout, or how much you've invested, or how many kids are disappointed. It cares about the deed. I had the deed. Karen didn't. She had assumptions. She had confidence. She had a Facebook group full of people who believed her when she called the lake ours. But none of that mattered when the sheriff asked the only question that counts: do you have anything in writing? And when the answer was no, the event collapsed. The crowd dispersed. The vendors left. And Karen lost her position, her reputation, and the trust of the community she claimed to represent. Not because I was cruel, not because I wanted to punish families or ruin anyone's day, but because I protected what was mine. And when someone ignored my boundaries, threatened me, and tried to steamroll over my rights, I didn't back down. I locked the gate, and I let the law do the rest. I walked down to the shoreline and stood on the dam, looking out over the water. The lake was quiet now, peaceful, protected. A few respectful neighbors had access. People who'd asked politely, followed the rules, and treated the land with care. They understood that access was a privilege, not a right, and they respected the boundaries that made that privilege possible. The rest of Summit Cove had learned a harder lesson. You can't assume. You can't demand. You can't show up with hundreds of people and expect the owner to just let it happen, because it's inconvenient to say no. This gate wasn't here to be cruel. It was here to be clear. It marked the line between public and private, between assumption and permission, between entitlement and respect. Karen thought numbers, noise, and emotional leverage would matter more than paper. She was wrong, because in property law, paper is everything. The deed, the documentation, the boundaries, that's what matters. Not how many people you invited, not how much you planned, not how loud you screamed when the gate stayed locked. You don't get rights by shouting them. You get rights by having them. I stood at the gate one last time, my hand resting on the cold steel of the lock, looking out at the empty road beyond. Karen had declared war. She'd threatened me. She'd promised I'd regret locking her out. But the only thing I regretted was that it had come to this at all. Because it didn't have to. If she had asked, I might have said no. But at least she would have respected the process. At least she would have acknowledged that the land belonged to someone, and that someone had the right to say no. Instead, she assumed, she ignored, she pushed, and when I held the line, she collapsed. Because this gate, this lock, this boundary, they weren't about power, they were about property. And property law is simple. You can bring 250 people, a DJ and a megaphone. You can shout about rights and nature and community. You can threaten lawsuits and news stories and public shame. But if you don't bring a deed or written permission, that gate stays locked. Because the land doesn't care how you feel about it. It only cares who owns it. And I own it. Every acre, every drop of water, every inch of shoreline. Not because I took it, not because I fought for it, but because it was deeded to me legally, clearly, undeniably. And when Karen tried to take it by force of numbers and noise, the law did what it always does. It asked one question: who owns the land? And when the answer was me, the gate stayed locked.